But one of the gaps, and it's a very important question you've asked, that led me to founding WACOL was the fact that I noticed that women lack access to justice. And when my mother was widowed, it came the stark difference between a man and a woman, and the treatment women get meted out became very clear. So it was also what propelled me to read law, and I said I was going to be defending the rights of the vulnerable groups. So that lack of access to justice, I knew that there were laws, and then I saw the gulf between law in the books and law in action, law in practice and law in the status book. That you may have law in the statute books that are dead letter, not even applying. People don't know about it. Take, for example, the dowry limitation laws in the eastern Nigeria in the 50s. Nobody obeys it. It recommends 50 pounds then, which is equivalent of maybe 50 naira, not in the sense of the current exchange rate. So when people come and say, oh, they're asking us to refund millions of naira in dowry bride price, I say, don't worry, we'll just go and deposit in a customary court 50 naira. So, but people don't, even when that law was enacted, people never obeyed it, Bride price, for example, in Igbo land is seen as almost like Lobola in Southern Africa. So nobody, I'm just giving an instance. There is a law against bigamy. And even in Nigeria, people don't obey it. So I'm just trying to show you the distinction between law in the book and law in practice, and the fact that some of the laws are ineffective. In fact, even one, the Taslim Elias, who became the president of International Court of Justice and Nigeria's former CJN, said if men in Nigeria were to be tried for bigamy, 95% of them would be in prison. And that's true. That's really true. So just to show you, but then we have laws protecting women, laws protecting children, laws protecting the vulnerable groups, but people say they are not aware. Ignorance of law is not an excuse, but I see lack of accountability, lack of interest in trying to ensure efficacious implementation of these laws. The extant laws are there. So if you talk about violations of rights of women, today we have the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act 2015. And I was at the forefront of not only just writing that piece of legislation, in the drafting, in the pushing for social and legislative advocacy that led to its passage at national level. And today, luckily, 35 states, in fact, almost all, I think the other states remaining has passed it, have adopted, 35 out of them, have adopted the equivalent at state level of violence against persons law. When you look at children's rights as well, you find that the Child's Rights Act, in fact, 36 states of the Federation have also laws protecting children. So, and who is a child? A child is a person under 18 years of age, and it could be a woman, a young girl, so long as they are under 18. And when you look at also the Administration of Criminal Justice Act, they have equivalent in all of the states of the Federation, and that is Administration of Criminal Justice Law. They all have protection. There is NAPTIP Act, the TIPLI Law, the Trafficking in Persons Prohibition and Related Matters Act. They are all there. But I think when it comes to violence against women, apart from the domestic law, we will know that we also have international and regional laws. And all of these laws protect women, because you have at the level of United Nations Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, known as CEDAW, which was enacted by the General Assembly of United Nations in 1979. Nigeria signed it in 1985. So Nigeria, in international law, is obliged to implement all of the provision, and it's called in 1985, even during military regime, that Nigeria ratified it. Nigeria equally ratified in 2004 what we call the Maputo Protocol, which is the African Charter's protocol on the rights of women in Africa. And it's very specific about women's dignity, prohibiting violence, all forms of violence, including whether perpetrated by its state and its agents, law enforcement. It talks about dignity of a woman. It talks about liberty of a woman, ability, physical harm, prohibiting sexual violence. And I said all forms of violence. So if you look at our VAB law, or the Enugu State also have the VAB law, and WACOL was at the forefront of passing this VAB law, including the Widowhood Protection Act. But what we have is a disconnect between the law and practice. But ignorance of the law is not an excuse, but we need to do more education and enlightenment so that people are aware that it shouldn't be business. We are a society governed by laws. And in a democratic society, there are certain things, minimum expectation, that human rights are respected, that human dignity are respected, that autonomy of a person, that bodily integrity, person's ability to self-determination, liberty. You don't, even if you're an accused person on a suspect, you have your right. And that's why we have Administration of Criminal Justice Act. You have to read the equivalent of Miranda Act, or you have right to remain silent. You don't just, badging on persons like what we've seen in recent time, degrading of women. And I think there is this penchant about nakedness or nudity of women. And people are feminine, and, whether older woman, I remember the woman who they say took snail in a forbidden forest. She was also, made naked, stripped naked. We have the Comfort Emerson case in a bomb. She was stripped naked.
And quite recently, the one in Anambra State.
Of course, that Jennifer, the youth copper, was just so sad. I wept when I saw that. I said, where are we headed? We've lost our humanity. Why would people that are supposed to protect us, protect women and girls, be the one that will expose them? How do we give gun to these reckless people, to go ahead, go around abusing people instead of protecting them, violating them in the most heinous manner? So if you look at it, they didn't even give them chance, and they are introducing themselves. We are coppers, a youth copper. We know is in national service, is a government picking, as we say, is an asset of the federal government. And you can't treat the person, in fact, nobody even deserve to be treated like that. Men or whether a man or a woman or a boy or girl, we must respect human rights. And the physical infliction of physical harm or sexual assault, see the way they were drawing her. See, even when she was naked, I'm like, are these people from Mars, outer space, or where that you're looking at a woman already, she's naked, and you're busy tearing her, pulling her. For what purpose? If she's committed a crime, remember, she's not armed. You are the one armed, and yet you couldn't do it in a very civilized manner. I think this is just a big dent, a big stain, on Nigeria, in Anambra State, and then she's entitled to exemplary damages, including that of her comfort. Because you see, a question of lack of training. That people that are law enforcement, whether vigilante, whether combined, whether whatever name it goes by, whether Kunejemba, whether Udokachi, whatever, and this equivalent all over Nigeria, that the impunity, impunity is allowed because we tolerate this impunity. That's why it continues. And we have to say zero tolerance. There is no accountability. Accountability to laws that we have enacted, extant laws that I've mentioned. Remember, our Constitution importantly prohibits torture, degrading, inhuman treatment, and punishment. It's prohibited clearly under our Constitution. So you can't, and everybody accused is innocent until found proven guilty. So also extrajudicial killing, recklessness in law enforcement, assault is prohibited under criminal law, penal laws, and they were assaulted. She was assaulted. She was her dignity was taken away. Her sanctuary, just exposed to ridicule. It's going to take a lot of time, for her to recover from this trauma. And that's why we said also, people who are victims, if you want to call it survivors, require a bit of they require support to overcome their victimization, to even heal. And sometimes we don't have enough of that. I'm very happy that we drafted, and it's Section 38 of the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act, which personally I was part of drafting in the original 2015 document, took care of this because it provides for protection, providing legal, medical, assistance, psychological support. So how are we giving it to this young lady? I expect also much from NYSC. They were just making it a domestic issue. This is a very national issue, And we wanted to hear from the top leadership, the highest leadership of NYSC, because also for far too long, people have also violated fundamental human rights of coppers.
Right.
I remember the Grace Oshang in 2009, who was murdered, raped and murdered in Boronu and around her neighborhood. And she was a national youth copper because for wearing khaki trouser. You know, many other coppers in the electoral jobs have lost their lives. There was a recent one in Sokoto again. You know, so you have that pocket of it around the country. And they have also been violated. I'm glad that they've stopped even some tests they call pregnancy and virginity tests, where they were even openly testing female coppers. You know. So some of this violation is ingrained. They are deep-rooted in our stereotypical attitudes and sex stereotypes of women, seeing women as sex object, as the other. So it's just like they were watching porn live, you know,
they were videoing it,
and then videoing and releasing that. It can also be responsible without protecting and covering that, and it was there making there. So there is no amount of damages. She deserved to be compensated. Those who inflicted this harm on her deserve to face the wrath of the law. They have to be prosecuted and punished for that. So take example, because very soon we will forget. And next time you may hear that they've even enlisted, been promoted from being a local community vigilante to being in the public force. So you can imagine if you arm them and they're part of mobile police, what they would do. I served in the end of SARS judicial panel of inquiry for Enugu State on police brutality, and I know what we had. You know, it is systematic, and some of these law enforcement, they disappear people, kill people extrajudicially, and nobody lives. It's just because on the one hand, I condemn the video strongly, especially in not protecting her, but on the other hand, also, as some people have argued, if that video didn't surface, we wouldn't have even known, because remember, this happened on 23rd of August. So how come that it took this long before we heard about the matter? It was when the video surfaced. Otherwise, so you can imagine the effect from the narration of count of the lawyer in Anambra State who is representing the lady, and I'm also ready to join force in also supporting, including WACOL, in legal action, you know, for her, and ensuring that those people prosecuting even the accused person or the suspect, because they say that they even started offering, oh, you can't be in this state without even having, you need to have like a boyfriend like us to protect you, you know, and then trying to even befriend them afterwards, and even the extortion of money. That was we've seen, and these are things that also led to disbandment of the NSAS when young people are targeted. So it looks like young people are really so vulnerable, so exposed, and there has been an exacerbation of gender-based violence, even in public spaces, and we need to check it. The government needs to declare a state of emergency. Remember, during COVID time, the state of emergency was then declared by the then government of Buhari, following what happened in Benin, how that lady was murdered and raped. I don't think anything has changed from the spike we've seen, but the major issue is breaking the silence, and women's you know, because there's a lot of stigma. So when initially they say she dropped charges, you know, you'll be ashamed of what has happened to you. You just want to, you know,
end that chapter very quickly.
Exactly. So, and then before it downs on you, and then, you know, now they say they are ready to prosecute, she wants to press charges. I think even without her pressing charges, there are certain, if people go outside, you know, they were enacted by law, acting lawfully, but they have exceeded. They are acting in excess of their mandate recklessly. So they are liable to doing those unlawful acts. Of course, when you say assaulting a police officer on a duty attracts very big punishment, that is because they know they are protected, and they have upper hand in terms of the power relation. So they ought to know that when you're dealing with citizens, and broad daylight, you know, why? And even if you had knocked at somebody's door, they thought it was armed robbers.
Shouldn't they have rules for engagement?
And then even for entering, because you can't say the law empower them to search anywhere. No, it doesn't work like that. And then you have to knock, there must be a protocol, a standard operation procedure. You knock and you wait. and you introduce yourself, and you can have a microphone and say, we are this and this and this. They said even their faces were covered. How do you go about covering your face? Even this is a practice in Nigeria that is becoming really very annoying. You see people on the road saying that they are covered, you know, marauding themselves. You don't know which one is robbers. You don't know which one is protected. It is actually very fearful. They are a mufti. They are, you know, so we have to have a way that these people are dressed properly, they identify themselves, because if they have identified themselves, we are this arm of you know, security for the state, and we are here, we are searching, please come out. We will, you know, and they can go in peacefully and search everywhere. But when you meet people in their home where how you dress, because you're in your home, because some people will say, women are causing this violence because of the way. Please, let's leave it, because it has nothing, absolutely nothing with the way they dress. I've been in this space for more than 3 decades. WACOL is 28 years old. WACOL has provided over 82,000 legal representation to women and children in vulnerable, including persons with disability, in vulnerable situation whose rights, human rights have been violated, including also survivors of sexual and gender-based violence.